We've since been joined by Amos Akingba, who is an elder statesman, also in a Deco chieftain. Thank you for coming on today, sir.
My pleasure.
And we'll still have Professor Akinyoyebode here with us in the studio. But, Prof, I mean, the conversation about whether or not there should have been a speech today, would there have been anything wrong if there was one today and then one on June 12th as well?
No, that would have been superfluous. Because the whole idea behind making 12th of June Democracy Day is not to lower the standing of what happened on 12th of June 1993, when Nigeria was robbed of a democratic transition. So I think, in my view, that the government felt that it would be overdoing things if it had a speech today and another one on 12th of June. The 12th of June speech will have just been, should I say, icing on the cake. So the government, I think, was better advised not to make an inauguration speech. It's not common in democratic societies for presidency, the change of baton to go unheralded. So I honestly felt that President Buhari would have said one or two things, aside from his interview on some national television network. It's an opportunity missed when the focus of the nation was on the tenure, the new tenure of the president. At least some soothing balm ought to have been administered on Nigerians to give them some impression of hope and optimism and what have you. Nigeria is right now on a slaughter slab, and Nigerians are yearning for, even if it's mere promises, of a better tomorrow.
But he made quite some in the oath that was taken, you know, the oath of allegiance, talking about to discharge his duties, you know, the fundamentals, upholding the fundamentals of the Constitution, and then, of course, the Chapter 2, to preserve the fundamentals, directive principles of, you know, enshrined in the Constitution, Chapter 2. I mean, these are also several promises and oath he has taken for Nigeria and Nigerians.
No, that's a mere formality. The formality is different from a definitive, I will even say pontifical statement from the President of the Republic at such an occasion. The formality of swearing in, oath of allegiance and what have you. Anybody who has that high position in the scheme of things will subscribe to the Constitution and what the Constitution promises the rest of the country. It's a moment of focus, and that's why I said it was a missed opportunity. What will he have lost by making, however brief, statement on what Nigeria can expect in the next 4 years?
But so do you think that it will make us look forward to that 12th of June, since no speech came through today? Sir, you think that you share the same view, Prof, that who knows, if he gave a speech today, wouldn't people have said, wait a minute, so what will be the significant difference between today and June 12th?
I think the Prof is very correct. I'm not even sure, from what we already know in the history of this administration, that there will be a speech on June 12th.
Why not?
I don't know. There's no speech now. There may never be speech again. Okay. You are taking an oath of office to serve the people. You tell them what you want to do. June 12th is a celebration of a missed opportunity. That's a different thing. Christmas is different from New Year Day. June 12th is different from the time you take oaths of office, when you should promise the people, tell the people, inform the people what you want to do.
Is this...
You don't have to wait till June 12th. June 12th was just a recent approval. Today is the day you took an oath of office. You are inaugurated. let us know what your agenda will be. We are not told that, and we are asked to wait for another day, June 12th. Suppose June 12th does not happen. When will we have the statement, the promise, the agenda of this administration? When? Are you saying now that the state governors who are taking oath today will wait till June 12th? I don't know.
Some would argue maybe we should take silence as acquiescence, in, as they say in law, and maybe also adopt what he said May 29, 2015. Do you think his body language would show that the perhaps famous quote that he's known for, I belong to no one, I'm for everyone, is something that he will still bring forward in the next 4 years?
That does not distract from the fact that he's taking an oath of office today following an election. He took oath in 2015. He didn't say that that was enough to cover today. He's taking another one. And indeed, the 4 years between 2015 and today, a lot has passed. A lot of water has passed under the bridge. And he should have informed us or let us know what he has done so far and what he intends to do for the second term. We are not informed about that. You see, as somebody mentioned, this is a militaristic approach. They don't think that Nigerians matter. They have conquered us. They can do what they want.
But we had this when President Jonathan came into office as well, the ceremony. It was the same thing.
Didn't he say anything?
Yeah, but when you say it's a military approach, is it in terms of the ceremony or the fact that there was a speech at the time?
Both.
But at that time, there was no the significance. They hadn't given recognition to June 12th.
That's what I'm saying. But now you give recognition to June 12th. It's a continuation of, if they think we matter, let them tell us what they are doing. They are supposed to serve us. They are public servants. They are not public masters. Let's get away from this sacrifice.
So, Professor Ibole, you think that that's significant, the no-speech policy, so to speak, significantly takes away something from this event?
Oh, definitely. I agree with Dr. Akingba that we have to separate issues. The ceremonial event of 12th of June is different from the inauguration of a new term for the president. The president, as from today, begins a new term of office. In fact, if his speechwriters were properly guided, he will have spoken about the need to change the architecture of security, the new ministers. He had 4 years to prepare for this transition. Now, this is a motion without movement, you know. The yearnings, aspirations, and goals, dreams of people who seem to have been dashed. I agree with my colleague here that it's almost contemptuous of the people. The people's government would definitely spin out some yearning, some goals, some inspirational statements that will give people some succor. Now, I don't see that today. This military parade or whatever with Scottish bagpipes introducing the president reminds me of the fact that we don't even have a culture, political culture, so to speak. We have to lean very heavily on the militarist culture to give the whole ceremony some semblance of ceremony. So for me, I'm grossly disappointed at those who are behind the planning and organization. They are taking Nigerians for granted.
But would you be disappointed if the ministerial list comes out a lot faster than the last time?
No, last time it took 6 months. And the president then said he had more reliance on technocrats than political masters of ministries. You just go and play back what we said here in these studios 4 years ago. That's why I said it seems we are in for more of the same. There's not going to be any dramatic, or what my friends call a paradigm shift in the way we carry on, or the way the president runs his government. You know, so I don't know. I think the president needs to rejig his kitchen cabinet. Advisors, the advisors have to advise him on propriety of actions. This doesn't take the people into account. Maybe he's still suffering from the problem of the judiciary because the matter of his presidency is hanging in the air. And so he might not want to overdo it because the courts still have to decide whether he properly won the elections. And maybe he's laboring under that particular heavy burden, okay? So on that score, I will understand him, that you don't want to over-celebrate before, because now that the Supreme Court is taking very interesting, drastic positions, the judges are now replacing themselves from the electorate. It seems the judges now decide who holds political office. It's not a good day for Nigerian democracy. In other places, South Africa inclusive, once the people speak, once they decide, then the events will run from there. But in Nigeria, you are not sure. As I said, never say never in Nigeria. Anything could still happen.
All right. Well, one of the other things which the president did speak about first time out was corruption. So let's have a look at this report, and then we'll delve into the fight against corruption.
It's one of the tripod upon which the Buhari administration campaigned and stands on. Corruption in every facet of the country's life is endemic.
Corruption is an existential threat to Nigeria.
Its effect on the country's fortune is profound. Poverty, poor infrastructure, and insecurity are just a few. The president believes fighting corruption is a must. In 4 years, the leading anti-graft agencies have reported successes. Monies and property have been recovered, with some high-profile individuals put behind bars.
Our policy was to tackle anti-corruption, grand corruption, beg your pardon, first. That was our policy, to deal with grand corruption first. By this I mean the stealing of huge public resources directly from the treasury.
First and foremost,
opinions on the level of successes are divided.
In the last 4 years, we have had occasions of heavy recovery of humongous amounts of money, which has been invested in social programs.
First and foremost, you need to even have a legal framework on how to recover, how to manage the recovered, asset. Right now, as I speak to you, we did not have, legal framework on how to manage the recovered asset.
The rate of convictions is said to be hampered by the slow judicial processes. This has heightened the call for special tribunals for corrupt cases.
We solely support, special court to try corruption cases because we have not yet reformed our judicial sector.
We need the buying of the legal profession, bar and bench.
Yet, others worry about the methods being adopted and a proper record of recovered items.
We have a public procurement law in place which is not been actually complied with, and most of the corruption actually are done within the public procurement. We have corruption in the defense and security sector, which is also making our lives and our country vulnerable to insecurity.
The president set up an audit committee that has since submitted its report. The implementation of the Treasury single account is said to be largely effective, but with room for improvement. While some individuals have been made to account for resources under their care, there are agencies of government that have gone unaudited for years.
You cannot be fighting corruption when over 66 or 67 government agencies have not been audited in Nigeria, and yet every year they collect annual budgetary allocation.
Despite the gains we have made in closing the gates, we know that there is still much ground to cover to stop systematic corruption.
This is one of the shortcomings of the fight against corruption, in view of many.
It's expected that it will now go down to the level of the states, to the level of local government, to the level of the private sector, in which values are going to be re-engineered.
On the positive side, there is increased awareness on the risks that come with corrupt acts. The impunity of the past may have been checked, but going forward, there is much work left to be done.
I will urge Mr. President to identify committed, patriotic, honest, experienced Nigerians to be appointed in different sectors, because if you do that, they would be in tandem with his idea and with his principle of the fight against corruption.
Our next level is to create the environment for collaboration between our agencies, civil society, and other stakeholders.
Apologize for that audio which we lost towards the end. Well, we do have some guests now who have joined us from our studios in Abuja. Professor Femi Odekunle is a member, Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption. And then sitting right beside him is Afam Osigwe, who is the former NBA General Secretary. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on the inauguration. But Prof, let me start with you. I mean, you did hear some part of a lot of that report, which was highlighted, speaking about, look, how do we adequately tackle corruption if we do not have laws to guide funds or assets recovered from such? So is that something that the government is considering putting into place?
Is that for me or for you?
For you, Professor.
Please, can I get the question again?
In that report, we did hear some suggestions as to we need to have a law to guide proceeds recovered from fights against corruption. Is that something that the government is looking into?
Well, it must be, to start with, there are a lot of submissions to the National Assembly, like the Proceeds of Crime Bill, whistleblower protection, special courts. Some of these bills have been lying with the National Assembly, and it's expected that the National Assembly will pass these laws. And if they pass these laws, they will sort of offset the lacuna that people are complaining about in the anti-corruption, in the laws related to anti-corruption fight.
Well, Mr. Osigwe, do we have okay, go ahead. Complete your thoughts.
But I would like to assure you that what has been recovered in terms of money, in terms of assets, have been executed within the context of extant laws. So there has been no breach of existing laws. They are just managing to ensure that people don't get away with murder, since the criminal justice system is fairly or relatively slow. And in the process, there has to be some stopgap to ensure that people don't get away with what they have been getting away with before. But I think all seizures, temporary or permanent, all assets recovery and management are being executed within the context of existing laws, to the best of my knowledge.
Mr. Osigwe, let's bring you in here. What do you think of what he said?
Is that for me or for you?
Hello?
Mr. Osigwe, that's for you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, so give us your impression of the fight against corruption.
Well, I think that the government has shown some commitment in fighting corruption. But I think that we need to move beyond a reliance on the prosecutorial agencies like the EFCC and ICPC to fight corruption. We must put in place institutional things. We must look at the budgeting process to ensure that those loopholes, those items that are continually repeated in the budget process, which end up in private pockets or hands, are done away with, so that people's ability to utilize public funds for their personal use is greatly minimized. We must put in place also a procurement process that ensures that there is transparency in the mode of procuring items for public expenditure, be it at the local government, state or federal government level. And above all, there must be things put in place by the governments to reduce people's pensions for stealing either what they don't need or what should ordinarily be for the, in the best interest of the people. Now, if we wait for people to steal, to catch them and prosecute them, it's like waiting at the end of the road for them to get there. We must make sure that they never embark on the road to corruption. And I think that this will be a better place to focus in this current administration, and also actually also auditing the lifestyle of public officers to be able to check that they live within their means. So we must be very creative in the fight against corruption. We must institutionalize it such that there will also be greater confidence in it. Prof has talked about assets management, so I wouldn't want to say much about that now. But there is need that pending the passage of the process of crime bill, which I understand is pending before the legislature, that those assets being recovered are properly managed, properly accounted for, and also properly audited for, so that we will know what has been recovered, how they are being spent, and then how the items of property are managed in such a way that they don't get dilapidated or wasted in the process of being in the recovery process, either while litigations are being pending or while litigations have closed. So we need to look at a whole gamut of things to make sure that we don't actually have to wait for people to be prosecuted and convicted for the fight against corruption to be seen to be making progress.
Mr. Sigwe, are you saying that our process at this moment in fighting corruption is more reactive than proactive?
Precisely my point, because we focus more on the prosecution. It should be more proactive, it should be more preventive. The essence of law enforcement is to ensure that people do not commit crime, largely, and also to preventing people from committing crime and apprehending them when they commit crime. That is not to say that the prevention part is not important, but the preventive aspect of it should be much more emphasized in the fight against corruption.
Yeah. Professor Adekunle, how do you react to that?
Yes, I understand Alfred very well, but I think you know, in social science we talk about there is no single reality. There are different realities. That is one reality, but the reality is that the government, the Buhari administration, has been doing exactly that. Remember, before 2015. The corruption situation in Nigeria was pervasive, was systemic, but most importantly, that it was covered with impunity, even up to high government circles, to the extent that we were talking about Nigeria being killed by corruption. And then this was being confronted. And one of the confrontation had to do with, in our analysis earlier on, we believe that one of the things missing was leadership, commitment, and will. So this man brought leadership, commitment, and will. He started. One of the first things he did was to constitute PACAC, the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, which was the think tank meant with omnibus mandate to ensure that all government activities and programs in terms of anti-corruption is coordinated with his advice. To that extent, our work had included capacity building of the agencies. Our work had included a kind of encouraging a paradigm shift in the way policymakers, prosecutors, judges see this matter of corruption. And that's why a lot has been achieved. In terms of whistleblower, for example, in one year, they had about 8 billion naira recovery. In about 3 years, out of the presidential initiative on continuous auditing, they recovered about 594 billion. I can go on and on, but that is not the point. Now, if you look at certain agencies like JAMB, like Customs, which used to be perhaps dense of malpractices, it means that the effect of the government position in terms of prevention and being proactive is there. So we should not only look at one reality and forget the other reality. Of course, there are other realities. I always argue that a lot has been done in the last 4 years, but there are still many rivers to cross. And this, I mean, one of the reasons why the public does not think may not think that the fight is sincere, or if sincere is not effective, is because of the inherent or design resistance of the legal profession, bar and bench, to this fight against corruption. Inherent because of the nature of our criminal justice system, by default, I mean by design, because of the corruption of a few of the judges and of the senior lawyers. Then of course you have the problem of the demands of the so-called democratic politics. So people see somebody who has been accused of being an FCC minister in court, winning election to become a governor of another state. They see a situation whereby people in the National Assembly collecting pension and other salaries. They see people, somebody who has been jailed 14 years, accumulating 171 million naira as his salary while in prison as a senator. Now, see, when people see these kind of things, they believe the thing is not working. It is not true. It is working, it is proactive, but I agree that we still have rivers to cross. For example, I believe there is need for a more solid foundation of the anti-corruption fight, so that even when this government leaves office, when Buhari leaves office, eventually, the fight will continue and it will succeed. So there is need for something like the Chinese revolutions, cultural revolution, whereby we need to reorient values. For example, PACAC now, at this point in time, we started since last December, going to the state and local government level, trying to, in cooperation with the National Orientation Agency, to bring the message down about the fact that if we don't fight corruption, we are all going to die, at least die socioeconomically, developmentally, politically, and our children are going to be ruined. Because as of now, if you want to know, all children born since 1980, about 39 years old now, they don't know any other society but a corrupt one, a society without indiscipline, a society of avarice. They know a society of greed, a society of cutting corners. That is the socio-cultural situation. That is, in addition to the material underdevelopment caused by corruption, corruption has caused a denigration of our social core values, and we are working on that. What I'm trying to say is that why some people may say not much has been achieved, we are not, it is not true. I mean, that's not the whole truth. The government is proactive, but it's not seen every day. Well, even when you talk about conviction, okay, some 5 judges have escaped being punished because of their conspiracy, but at the same time, EFCC and ICPC have recorded hundreds of convictions in the last 4 years. It's just that it is those that are up there in the public domain and very high profile that escape because of the, like I said, the resistance of the legal profession, that it gives the impression to the population that the fight is not successful. It is. I've talked about recovery, I've talked about assets, and I've talked about the fact that there are poster agencies like JAM, like Customs, which shows that the anti-corruption fight is actually taking root.
Professor
but
Dekunle,
take my word for it.
Let's get our gentleman here. I'd like Professor Oyebode to, weighing on this. He said a lot of things, and you understand the workings of the legal system in Nigeria. I mean, is the judiciary incapacitated the way he has talked about people escaping because they're politicians? I mean, why are we in this fix? Because for the people out there, they see someone who's brought to court 2012 and 2018, 2019. The case is still in court.
Well, people talk about the technicalities of the legal system. But I want to remind Nigerians generally that England, from where we borrowed our legal system, had the concept of unjust enrichment, okay, which is very similar to what the Buhari government is trying to achieve. Maybe not proactively enough, in terms of when we look at you, see your lifestyle, see whether or not you are living beyond your means. And then if you are found to be living beyond your means, then we must compare you to disgorge the surplus weight that you have acquired, lucre of office and what have you. But it needs an overhaul of the criminal justice system. You see, in Nigeria, we have what we call the adversarial system, where the onus of proof is on the prosecution, and an accused person is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt. And in England, they used to say that it's better for 9 accused persons to escape what you call justice than for one innocent man be wrongly judged. Whereas in France, where they have what you call an inquisitorial rather than adversarial system, there's a presumption of guilt on the accused person. The onus lies on the accused person to exculpate himself. So we might actually need, well, we've used the phrase paradigm shift quite a number of times here.
I thought I was about to say we need that inquisitorial system.
No, well, that is what people are
maybe.
talking about, that we will continue to go around in circles, except and unless and until we adopt that inquisitorial, the French system, so that the lawyers will not profit from plea of innocence, you know, to a reasonable extent, and behave almost like you have in places like Hong Kong, Singapore, and to an extent China, where the systems have been so conducted to catch these fat cats that are milking the wealth of the people. The sanction we prescribe, for instance, slap on the wrist. I remember an accused person who was, I can't remember now how much he's alleged to have illegally converted. And he was given a fine of 700 and something thousand. And he paid it just like that and sped away in a cloud of dust in his fancy Mercedes. And that is an arrow in the heart of ordinary Nigerians. It happened there in Abuja. So maybe we have to overhaul our criminal justice system. And we might have to send our lawyers back to school to relieve them of the onerous baggage of English criminal jurisprudence, to make them now think anew. Something like my friend Femi Odekunle was talking about, a cultural revolution like you had in China, so that even senior lawyers are now accused of corrupt practices. And I used to say that if gold rusts, what should iron do? So we need to go back to the drawing board to rescue a legal order from abuse and exploitation by lawyers that want to protect and defend those who are accused of corrupt practices.
Now, I'd like to ask you again, sir. In essence, you're saying that the legal system we have, I mean the legal system, not the laws now, the legal system is not strong enough to fight corruption the way it ought to be fought.
It is strong, but it could do better if we introduce necessary reforms. Borrow a leaf from the jurisprudence against corruption in countries like I mentioned, Singapore. And don't forget, Lee Kuan Yew was a lawyer, a British-trained barrister, but he reformed the system in his country that Singapore now is the toast of many countries in terms of decent lifestyle. Hong Kong, of course, used to be a British colony, but the reforms that Hong Kong had effected in its criminal jurisdiction has removed a lot of the advantages that accused persons generate. Right. Nigerians might not like corrupt people to be executed like it's done in China, but I'm saying the signal should be sent to all and sundry that in terms of optics, the government has done well. There is now a better perception of the anti-corruption attitude which the government tries to foster. But you now take the battles home to corrupt elements, sequester their wealth from them, increase the sanction, lock corrupt people up, throw away the keys. I mean, do something radical to ensure that people don't learn from from the examples of those who have been corrupted.
We'll be talking to some of our correspondents across some of the states. And we'd also like to thank you, especially those of you sending us lots of comments and questions as well via our email, and that is inauguration@channelstv.com, and also following the hashtag on Twitter. But I'd like to take this question. We're on the issue assessing the corruption fight, and we have our guests in Abuja and here in Lagos. But this question, this is a comment from Fashanu Olaito, and an MSc student in Finland, saying to actually reduce corruption, Nigeria must have a database of all the citizens of Nigeria. Every Nigerian must be captured, given a social security number, which will serve as the only way to identify Nigerians irrespective of social status. He thinks that the government agencies will also be able to track the activities of Nigerians. And now ask the elder statesman, Mr. Kimba, what are your thoughts on this? Assessing the anti-corruption fight, will this work, having social security numbers for all citizens in Nigeria is one way to curbing corruption?
I don't know that it can work because we don't even have a correct population figure. And then the people who are speaking from the diaspora in advanced countries, they think it's an easy thing to do when there is no electric power. Who is going to do it? You see, we are very good in Nigeria at treating the effects of the disease rather than the cause. I listened to previous speakers on this platform. I'm amazed by their failure to see that what they are talking about as problems. Even the other guy said it's different realities, as if there are different facts. These are the consequences of the structure we have. The taproot of our problem is the Nigerian centralized unitary constitution that has brought into the service of the public domain people who do not give public service but give personal service. And they have friends, whether in the judiciary or the legislature or the executives. They are not going to do more than, we are going to have an inauguration of more of the same. As long as we have a unitary constitution in an ethnic, diverse country that ought to be practicing federalism. I'm glad recently when the president said we should go to true federalism. And I was happy, and I'd hope he can walk the talk. Unless and until we have a constitution that recognizes our uniqueness as multi-ethnic society, we will be putting a square peg in a round hole. It wouldn't work. All the complaints, all these judiciary or committees, they will not work, because they are not answerable to the existential requirements of our lives.
But Chief Akimba, is it about the constitution that we're running or the people who are operating it?
The people are produced by the constitution. And if the constitution, look.
But we elect the people.
We elect the people. That's where I'm going now. Most people who go into public office through election, they spend billions. More than what official salary will cover when they get there. If you have relations as journalists, you should find out how much it costs a governor to become a governor in any state of the Federation, how much it costs the senator to become a senator in any state of the Federation. They spend a lot of money. They buy these offices. Decent people who are interested in public service will not do so.
So how do they make the change if they don't get into the system?
You cannot get into the system unless you bribe and you're corrupt. And once you are there, you carry your corruption with you. Hey, my friend, anything that has a beginning has an end. The way we are going now, in fact, when the president said we need to go for true federalism, I said, good, Mr. President, but you may be too late. People don't want those kind of lies anymore. They want to take their lives into their hands. Nigeria is slipping away. The existential problems in the north, in the south, is alarming. We are underreported. People are dying. Villages are sacked. There is no job for graduates. Families are breaking up. And you tell me you are inaugurating more of the same problem without addressing the taproot, the problem, which is that the constitution we have is not suitable for us. It's not producing for us the kind of people who will serve us.
Talking about, you said that we have a constitution that is over-centralized. Does that have any bearing with the fact that the constitution is a product of the military? Yes. Which is a unitary...
Yes, they imposed it upon us in 1966, and it has not changed. It has gotten worse time and time again. Many people, Obasanjo, to the other, to Jonathan, proposed conferences to do it. And even when the 2014 conference took place and made very far-reaching recommendations, Buhari threw it away and set up his own when he won in 2015, the El Rufai Committee. They also made far-reaching cut-and-paste recommendations from the 2014 one. Buhari threw it away.
But Chief, you know that those who came up with the 1999 Constitution, I mean, they largely were not military people. The committee, headed by Justice Nikitobe, was not a military person. So the people who partook, who went to the country and said, look, this is what Nigerians say they want. How do we then say it was a military one that foisted it on us?
Look, my friend, somebody who sent you a message has given you a template. The military set up that. It could be all right. There are many progressive military regimes throughout the world. Only ours is bad. In fact, some people are saying that the Nigerian military is not entirely Nigerian military. It's one ethnic military dominating the others through the barrel of the gun. So please don't mistake the issue of causes and effect. If you go about chasing smoke and leaving the fire away, it will suffocate you and you'll die. And Nigeria is in a retrogressive evolutionary mode. We're going backwards in every aspect of our private and public lives.
I want to take my question to Abuja, and that's to Professor Odekunle. I mean, the South African president, who was just inaugurated as well, said something about tackling corruption and then rejuvenating the economy. But then he said, starting with the ANC, the political party, are we looking at corruption in political parties to begin with?
Well, let me, in answering that question, I would like to talk over from what the last speaker and Professor Oyebode said. One of the reasons why I've always over the years appreciated Oyebode, not just because we are ideological soulmates, but because he doesn't think just technically like a lawyer. He puts Nigeria before his profession, and he thinks social scientifically. And that goes to his reference to Singapore, and South Korea, and Malaysia, where the leaders got together. When I say leader, I'm not talking about a useless commissioner conference where they will have 1,000 references, recommendations concerning this, that, sharing. No, that is the leader of the government, that's executive, the leader of the National Assembly, the leader of the judiciary, and the leader of the fourth estate, the press, and say, they don't have to be more than 20. Where do we want to go? And once they determine that, it will affect the operations of the party, whether it is PDP or APC or whatever party. That is what happened in South Africa, that the party realized that the country was going to go to the dogs, and the party then took action to deal with the erring president and to install, instrumentally as it were, the process of re-engineering their country, not to go the way of Nigeria, but to start nipping corruption in the bud. So one of the things Nigeria needs to do is that the leadership of this country, of the arms of government, executive, legislature, once they, and the judiciary, once they do that, it should affect the judiciary. It should affect the salary of the National Assembly. It should affect the destructive, what do you call this, security vote. Those things are technicalities that will go down. But first of all, the leadership of the country must agree that this is a consensus. And then after that, it is important that outside of the EFCC, ICPC, that they should be giving more money for operations, they should be giving more resources for operations. Outside of these agencies, I suggest there must be a presidential task force to ensure that day in, day out, we are engaging in some kind of anti-corruption vigilantism all over the country, because we are now talking about corruption only at the federal government. We have not covered the states, the local government, the private sector, the banks, the CBN, the NNPC. It's all over the place. And despite the progress that has been made, we must have this leadership consensus. You didn't have leadership consensus in the last time. Buhari has been an oasis of integrity in a cesspool of corruption. So now you need the leadership of the country in all the hands of government to actually go together and say, this is where we are going. In that case, whoever else is God, whether in the APC, whether in the government, outside of the government, whether in judiciary, in the legislature, they will be dealt with. And people, the member of the public will see that. And once they see that, people will follow. After all, in developing countries, it is the head that works the tail. Once the head says, we are not going to deal with corruption, I mean, not just the president, but the leadership, the people will follow. It is because leadership has not manifested this, that's why we're having this problem. Whether we use NIMSI, those are technicalities. But the general broad core values must be imposed by persuasion or by coercion. I'm sure a lot of lawyers will not agree with me, but I will say that there is need, when you want a revolutionary change, when you want to force social change, you use persuasion, you also use coercion. My brother Alfred was saying that, Prof, why are you against? I'm not against lawyers. Akimbode Oyebode is a lawyer. Falana is a lawyer. GT Ogunye is a lawyer. He himself is a lawyer. And I appreciate them. But I want a profession that puts the country before their profession, before their pockets. Because if there's no country, there's no profession. And they have inherently been against the corruption fight. And by design, they also do so. And we have to deal with that. Also, the democratic politics does not mean must be corrupt. Something must be done about that. But that's why I say there must be a consensus of leadership. Then all the little technicalities that people are talking about, reform of the constitution and the like, will definitely come in. But there must be that agreement at the top.
Agreement there at the moment. Mr. Sigwe, Mr. Sigwe, is the agreement there at the moment?
Among leadership?
Yes, among the leadership.
No, I don't think there's any such. I don't think there's any such agreement at the moment.
Yeah, Prof. Let's bring in Mr. Sigwe for that. Go ahead, Mr. Sigwe.
Okay. I didn't get your question, please.
Well, Prof just made some. You heard Prof. Okay, let's get your reaction to what Prof said.
Now, I think that trying to lay the blame. Sorry, Chamberlain. What did you say?
Go ahead.
Now, I think we'll be missing the picture if we try to lay the blame for the perennial corruption in Nigeria at the doorstep of lawyers. And I think we all have to admit that we have all seen and come short. And that we need to do more as a people, as a nation, to eradicate corruption in our system, trying to put it at the doorstep of any singular profession like the legal profession will regret, like Prof has done, would amount to missing the point. Like I said, we need to institutionalize this thing. We need to have a nation where we don't have a president who will be a saint in the midst of corrupt people, as Prof would have summed it up. We need to have a process-driven fight against corruption that is not dependent on any particular individual. We need to have a way of fighting corruption that it's in our gene, it's in our DNA, it's a way of life. We need to have a people that abhor corruption, that in everything we do things that promote nationhood. Now, Prof may well be like a friend of mine that, I said this to him earlier, jokingly, that propagated the theory of what he called caught in the act theory. That if you're caught committing an offense, alleged committing, should be dealt with summarily, and that could excuse lynching or any form of mob action or vigilantism. Until he was wrongly accused of committing an offense and he changed. Whether you like it or not, lawyers are an essential part of the fight against corruption. The prosecutor is essentially a lawyer. Some of those involved in the investigation are lawyers. Those who defend them are lawyers. Those who judge them are lawyers. And it appears to suggest that the investigation is so stellar that the investigation is such an open and shut case that the persons accused cannot escape conviction. But we all know that that may not necessarily be the case. We need to have a nation that focuses on the right. And like I said earlier, the nation has to be more proactive, preventing this. Now, what is the fraction of the corruption cases, of the corruption issues that really get to the court? And I say it's very minute. So many of them are under the radar. So many things get away with murder, as it were, without ever being caught or charged, or even any allegation being leveled against them. So we need to really get it right, so that let us not dissipate energy blaming one corruption or the other. We need, all of us pay the price of corruption, whether we are defense counsel, whether we don't even have anything to do with it, whether we are far removed like a market woman, the bus conductor, the ordinary man in the street, we all pay the price. For that road that could have been constructed and is not constructed because somebody chose to pocket the money, for that hospital that is not built or is built and not equipped because the money has been diverted, for that thing, for social infrastructure that ought to be there and is not there, we all pay the price. So all of us need to fight this, and in so doing, the nation must come first. But how do we do it? Not by blaming people. It's not by making it a media event. You level allegations and then you'll not be able to sit down and prove the allegations. It's not by being selective in the way you do it. It has to be an institutional thing. We need to do so many things. I thought that PACAC, and if I didn't know, if they have done that, then apologies to them, would have suggested by now that an act like the Land Use Act ought to have been amended by now to make it such that the process of registration of title, transfer of title, will not only be mandatory, but will be seamless and very easy. Could be done by private companies. This waste of time of having governors' consent that at the end of the day amounts to an unnecessary waste of time and creates room for corruption at the different levels at the land registry should be done away with, like they do in some Western countries. There are title companies involved in transaction that should be able to do this. How can we be serious about fighting corruption when in Nigeria you can own 200 houses and not register them, and none of them is traceable to you? Where we do not care about how people live their life and how they sustain their lifestyle. How can we keep gathering data? Today you have a BVN, you have need, and we are not putting them to use. These are things we must put to use to be able to tie in income and expenditure and lifestyle. We must institutionalize this to make it less attractive to fight corruption. It is nice to quote Singapore, to cite Singapore, China, Malaysia, but these countries have also utilized technology to fight corruption. We should not have a one-man show where only one individual is seen to be a saint and every other person is not. We need to have a nation where fighting corruption is a way of life, and no particular person has to be singled out for exceptional commendation. It should be in our lifestyle.